Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yacker. My guest on today's show is Vegas-based award-winning author Paul W. Papa. I'll be talking with him about his book, Haunted Las Vegas, Famous Phantoms, Creepy Casinos, and Gambling Ghosts. Paul W. Papa, welcome to Paranormal Yacker.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
You, Paul, are a longtime resident of Las Vegas. Although you were not born there, it has been your home for many years. Out of curiosity, I would like to know, where were you born? What drew you to Vegas? And what is there about the city that keeps you there?
I was born in Massachusetts. My parents moved to Wyoming when I was 5. I was raised in Wyoming. I tell people that the reason that I moved to Las Vegas was because I strapped a snow shovel to the front of my car and drove till somebody asked me what it was. The truth is, I'm not a big fan of snow and cold temperatures, and Las Vegas was going through a boom. I just thought that seems like a pretty cool place to be. So I came down here. I love doing outdoor things. I love being in nature, and Vegas is most people don't realize that because they're down on the strip most of the time, but it is surrounded by BLM land. So there's all sorts of hiking and biking and kayaking and all sorts of stuff to do here. That's kind of what drew me. But what kept me here was the history of this town. It's not very old. It was less than 150 years old when I moved here. And it has seen so much in such a short time that I just fell in love with the place. I found it fascinating. And it doesn't hurt to be able to go outside your door any time of the year and not have to worry too much about the weather.
There are certain phrases from movies, TV shows, and various other show business venues that have become part and parcel of our vocabulary. What comes to mind is "Go ahead, make my day," said by Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry. "I'll be back," spoken by Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, and "yada yada" from Seinfeld. And perhaps one of the most quoted phrases is "Elvis has left the building," which was often used by public address announcers at the conclusion of an Elvis Presley concert in order to dispense audiences who stood around in hope of an encore from Elvis. However, as I learned from your book, he did not leave the building, at least not the one he stayed in when he did his shows in Las Vegas. That's according to his stepbrother and bodyguard, as well as many other people. What, Paul, can you tell me about the spirit of Elvis, who has taken up permanent eternal residency in Vegas?
Vegas was special to Elvis because when he came here the first time, he bombed. He did not do well at all. He was just starting out and he was billed as the atomic kid, and audiences just weren't ready for him. And then, of course, he had all his popularity and his fame, and he became big. He did the movies and he went into the army. He kind of stopped touring. He got a little older and he got a little nervous about whether he was going to be accepted or not back on stage. And so they made a deal for him to go to it was the International at the time. It proved that Elvis was still as popular as ever because he sold out shows, every single show. He was a huge hit. People loved him. It was an adoring crowd all the time. And I think when you're famous, that adoring crowd is a wonderful thing to have. And I think it's probably addictive. I think if you're going to hang out anywhere, you want to hang out with people who love you. If you've seen any of those shows, either in person or you can now see them, of course, on the internet, you can just see that the crowd just ate him up. They just absolutely loved him. And he loved them. He loved being in front of them. It was probably one of his favorite places to be. It seems like his spirit has decided that he wants to stay in that environment, even though the hotel has changed. It's changed names many times. It's undergone renovations, but he still seems to hang out there. He has been seen backstage. He's been seen in the room that he occupied the entire floor, the top floor of the building. He's been seen up there. His Cadillac has been seen. One of my favorite things is people have seen his Cadillac drive into a wall and then it just disappears. So maybe that wall wasn't there when he was driving, but it just seems to drive right into that wall and disappear. This is his place to hang out.
Wow. Infamous Brooklyn-born gangster Bugsy Siegel is responsible for starting the ball rolling, or should I say slots rolling, by building the Flamingo Hotel, the first major gambling casino in Vegas. It has been reported that his spirit never left the grounds of the hotel. What, Paul, can you tell me about that?
This is one of my favorite stories because Bugsy loved Hollywood and he wanted Hollywood to come here. When he took over building of the Flamingo, he was so excited to build a place where people could come and be. He got involved in the Flamingo and he was going to call it the Flamingo Club, but somebody already had that name, so he just dropped the club and called it the Flamingo. He put all his time and effort in it, had this grand opening, and he opened at the wrong time and it flopped. And he was a terrible businessman. He ended up losing all sorts of money. Materials would get stolen from his property and then they'd sell them back to him the next day. He just wasn't in charge of doing that. He was a person with a great idea, but a terrible business sense. He would ask for more money and the mob thought he was stealing it. He might have been or might not have been, I don't know, but they got rightfully nervous about it and they had him taken out. The sad thing about it is the Flamingo actually was a success. It opened under new management pretty quickly afterwards. It became the flagship of the Strip for the longest time. The vision that he had was the right vision. If he had gotten somebody else to manage that thing, he probably would, well, he wouldn't be alive today, obviously, but he would have lived a whole lot longer than he did. He just couldn't manage it. But the vision was right, and it did usher in a whole new style of Las Vegas, away from casinos and into resorts and giving people more than just some place to gamble like the downtown casinos were at that time. Because he loves the place, interestingly enough, he had a room built there. If anything were to happen to him, he could go to that room. They called escape rooms back then, but it meant something different. You could go there and escape whoever was chasing you. And it went down to a garage and he could scoot out. And strangely enough, as we all know, that's not where he ended up dying. That place there is where he's seen most of the time. It is now the wedding area, and he is seen outside in there dressed in the 50s. He's very polite to people. He'll talk to them sometimes. People will talk about this. They don't say an old man. He's kind of like how he was when he was here, but he's dressed like a man from the 50s. And he'll talk to them and he'll kind of laugh a little bit and then they'll turn around and he'll be gone. He also seems to like to walk through people, which is kind of weird. He gets a kick out of that, just walking through people. But he is seen in that area and it's an outside area now of the Flamingo. And you can go there and there's a plaque to him and to what he did. The Flamingo does recognize him and recognize what he started. His legacy still lives on here in Vegas.
The ghost of comedian Red Fox, who is best known for his popular sitcom TV series Sanford and Son, is said to haunt the residents of his Vegas home and that he's responsible for creating a fair amount of paranormal activity there. In what ways, Paul, has Red Fox manifested himself at the home?
This is a great story. I actually live near his home. I drive by it on a pretty regular basis. Every time I drive by, I wave and say, "Hi, Red." What happened was, this is another story of a person who was talented but had no business sense. And Red Fox got himself in trouble with the IRS. And the IRS came a-calling. And they took all of his stuff, auctioned his stuff off. He owned that truck that was on the Sanford and Son set. And he had it at his house and they took that. They sold it to a gas station that was just on the corner. This poor guy had to drive home every day and see that truck that he used to own sitting at this gas station. The one thing that they didn't get was his house. He was able to keep that house. He loved that house. Because of that, he kept his presence there. He had a pool in the back. The house was owned by some people. An Elvis impersonator of all people bought the house once. He just kept hearing noises and people out in the back, different things happening. It drove him crazy enough that he couldn't live there. And so he sold it to a business. The same thing was happening to the business. They would hear parties out in the pool. One of the funniest things that I love is they would be typing on their computer, the font would suddenly turn red. He wasn't a mean ghost. He liked to play tricks on people. He would do kind of silly things, move stuff around and change things. I had a seance and they contacted him and they asked him, why are you doing this and how can we get you to stop? And he said, I love my home. My home is very important to me. If you let everybody know that this is my home, then I will stop. So they put up lights. So the home is lit all through the night. They have a sign out front that's the name of their business. And they put two little red foxes, one on either side of the sign. So no matter which way you're driving down the street, you see the sign, you see a little red fox. And so they know that that's Red Fox's home. That's what they did to make the home stand out and be Red Fox's and known that it was his. And so since then, his activity has died down. I haven't heard of that happening much anymore.
The flamboyant entertainer Liberace opened and frequently entertained guests at his Las Vegas restaurant, Tivoli Gardens. His ghost has been reported to be seen there on several occasions. Can you, Paul, tell me about some of those sightings?
Everybody knows Liberace from his piano playing, and he was an amazing piano player, probably one of, if not the most talented piano players in the world. He started playing when he was young, and by the time he was 5, he was taken to, I don't remember the name of the person that was teaching him, but the person that was teaching him was a well-known piano player and teacher of students. The teacher couldn't teach him after 5 because he had outplayed the teacher. He was better than him. There was nothing left to teach him. And obviously he kept getting much better as he went along. One of the things that people don't know about Liberace, or maybe some people don't know, is that he was also a fantabulous chef. He loved to cook and he loved to invite guests over. And so he opened a restaurant because of that. And a lot of times after the show, he would have private cookouts with his guests. He would invite them over to the restaurant and he would cook for them. And he just loved doing that. One of the parts of this restaurant was this beautiful bar he got from overseas and brought it over and had it installed there. And it's beautiful, ornate wood. And after he passed, he liked to hang out there. I think it was probably one of his favorite places because it was very intimate and his friends were there and he was doing things that he loved. And one of the bartenders was talking about him possibly being gay, which he denied his entire life. Whether he was or not is a matter of speculation, I guess you could say. He sued papers that said he was, and he won. That was not something that he wanted to be out there, whether because he wasn't or because of the time, or he thought it would affect his career or whatever, but he didn't like people talking about that. One of the bartenders was talking about it. A glass, actually a bottle, flew off the shelf down just right near where she was. That doesn't sound like a big deal, except those bottles are rested they're not level. They're positioned a little bit like this so that they won't fall. And it just kind of came off. The other things that he would do is when they closed the place, they would have all the ashtrays and stuff all on one table to set them out again the next morning, and they'd all be moved around. Or they'd be set up again for the next morning, and they'd come in and find them all on one table. He would move things around. There's another bar in there that's shaped like a piano. All the walls in there are mirrored, and people would see him in the mirrors in that piano room. He was pretty harmless, although every once in a while, maybe he heard somebody say something they shouldn't, but he would lock people in the bathroom sometimes. People would go to the bathroom and the door would be locked and they couldn't get out and they'd panic and somebody would have to come over. And it's a key lock. It's not like you could close it and it locks on its own. It had to be locked by somebody. There's a lot of reports about that. I was lucky enough to talk to several of the employees before the place unfortunately closed down that told me about that happening very frequently.
A strange mist has been surrounding the playground at Fox Ridge Park, a popular city park. Also, the swing, which has been called the Demon Swing, has been seen swinging by itself. This paranormal activity is attributed to the ghost of a young boy. What is the backstory to this haunted park?
Well, it kind of depends on who you ask. One of the most popular ones is there's a school in that area, just right close to this park. The park is actually on the corner of a block, and there's a church across the street. There's a school behind it, and then a little bit further down, there's houses. Probably the most prevalent theory is the little boy was at school and he ran out into the street and he got hit by a car and was killed. There is no evidence that that happened. There's no historical records to show that happened. In fact, there is no historical records to show that a death of a child of any type occurred in that area. However, it is one of the places that has the most paranormal activity. Let me put it that way. People go there, investigators go there, they see this swing moving all the time. You have to know that this isn't in an area where a lot of wind comes through, so it's not like wind is blowing things around. And most of the time, this stuff seems to happen right around midnight is when the swing starts going. There's people who have tried to engage the child by rolling balls toward them, and the balls will roll back, and then the swing will start moving. And then what happens that people say, and I have not seen this myself, but enough people have said it that it's out there. You'll see a child on the swing and he's kind of smiling, but if you approach him, his face kind of turns and it looks very demonic, and then he disappears. He doesn't like people to be around him. He certainly doesn't like people to be on the swing. If it's moving and you try to sit on it, people feel like they're getting pulled off. He doesn't want people on his swing. And then he just disappears. And when he disappears, I have never heard of a time where he's disappeared and come back that same night. So once he's gone, he's done.
Students and staff at the Las Vegas Academy of Performing Arts, which was originally built as the first high school in Vegas, have reported seeing a ghost roaming the premises. They named him Mr. Petrie. How did those who saw him describe what he looks like? And did he reveal anything about himself to them?
Mr. Petrie is fun. He's become like the school's mascot. That school is still there. It's a performing arts school. And like you said, it was the first high school built in Las Vegas. It's built in the Art Deco style, and it's a stunningly beautiful school, both on the inside and the outside. Mr. Petrie likes to hang out in the auditorium, and he likes to hassle kids who are supposed to be in class but aren't there. And that's why people think he's a teacher. There has never been a teacher there called Mr. Petrie. There isn't anybody in the area called Mr. Petrie, so we don't really know where the name has come from. But he kind of likes to play pranks on people. He'll get up on the catwalk and turn lights on when they're not supposed to be on, or turn them off when they're not supposed to be off. The people who do see him, they'll be sitting in the chairs like in the auditorium, and he'll approach, and they'll think it's a teacher thinking, oh crap, we got caught. And then they notice that he's not touching the ground, that he's floating. So when he moves up there, he's kind of floating up the aisle as he comes towards them. He's never done anything bad to anybody. He's never hurt anyone. He may be the ghost of a teacher that was there that is trying to corral those kids and get them back into class, and clearly has a fun sense of humor because he likes to just pull those little pranks on people. The kids there consider it an honor if you've seen him. They're not afraid of him at all. It's the big deal that if you've gotten to see Mr. Petrie, then you must be something special. One of the rumors is that he might have been named after the Dick Van Dyke character, Robert Petrie from the Dick Van Dyke Show with Mary Tyler Moore. That hasn't been confirmed either, but that's the closest pronunciation, and that's probably why people think that.
Bonnie Springs Ranch, built in 1843, is considered to be a hotbed of ghostly activity. Can you, Paul, tell me about some of the paranormal happenings that have taken place there?
Bonnie Springs Ranch, which unfortunately is not there anymore. Bonnie passed away a few years ago, and none of her children wanted the place, and they sold it to a developer, which is unfortunate. But before that, Ghost Adventures, which is a pretty known group here in America, they went there, and they did several times they went there to document paranormal activity. There's a schoolhouse there, and when I went on the tour, Cowboy Joe took me around. He was the manager of the place, and he would tell me that they often heard kids in that schoolhouse, even though there was nobody in it. There is a merry-go-round that we all used to play on those when we were kids. It would just start spinning on its own. This isn't something the wind's going to do. That thing is pretty heavy. It would take a pretty gale force to get that to turn, and it would start spinning. And then when people approached it, it would stop. If the wind was doing that, it wouldn't just suddenly stop like that. There's also a opera house where a lot of ghosts were seen moving in that area. You could see the shadows moving at night, or people would see things when they'd have events in there and people would see things moving. And then they had a wax museum, which was kind of strange because it was partially underground. And so you'd go in there to the wax museum. It was nice because it was much cooler when you were down there. There was one of the wax figures dressed as a priest. They would come in and find him moved. And these wax figures were bolted to the ground. They were bolted in place. So it's not like you just pick the thing up and move it. And they would come in and they would find it moved. Nobody had any idea who did it. The area is supposedly built on a Native American burial ground. I haven't confirmed that that is true, but it is along the old Spanish Trail. And so there is a lot of history in that area. That probably accounts for a lot of the paranormal activity. And up the area up behind there, there's a lot of petroglyphs, and the Paiutes, which are the Native Americans of our area, consider that a sacred area. And that could be why there's activity there as well.
All types of paranormal activity, some of it quite chilling, has been reported for years at the historic Boulder Dam Hotel. Could you, Paul, describe some of those events?
Most of what is supposedly taken place there happens in the basement. And people have just gotten weird feelings down there, or they had a lady who came through and said she was a medium, and she said these very bad things have happened there. I never talked to anybody who saw anything there, and I have written another book about Boulder City, and I spent hours and hours in that basement because it's full of historical documents. And I never felt anything weird there. I never saw anything weird there. None of the employees have ever seen anything there. Supposedly, one of the owners committed suicide when they were building the place. It has a lot of historical background. I included it in the book because it's fascinating what people think about it and what people talk about it. And I kind of wanted people to go there and visit it. But it's, in my opinion, it's not a place that really is haunted.
Goldfield, Nevada, which is only 186 miles from Las Vegas, is considered to be the most haunted town in Nevada. How, Paul, did it get that reputation?
Goldfield is the place where Virgil Earp, Wyatt Earp's brother, passed away. They were there for a while trying to make their fortune. It was one of those boom towns that just happened. And in the middle of it, they built this beautiful hotel that at the time would have just been this gorgeous thing. It's 3 or 4 stories. It's a brick hotel. And there's rumors about one of the owners having killed his bride in there. And she supposedly haunts the place. And a lot of paranormal activity has happened in that hotel. The owner of the hotel will not open it up. Every once in a while, let the paranormal groups in there to do some things. I think 3 or 4 times the Ghost Adventure people have been there. He doesn't run it as a hotel anymore. He keeps it blocked up. So I had to talk to people who knew things about it because I wasn't allowed inside of it. Unfortunately, the inside has become run down because he just hasn't kept it up. I think it's because it was a mining town. You know how those mining towns are. They're rough. You have a mixture of people with money and people trying to get money. And there's a lot of shootings and bad things that happened in those towns. And probably that hotel was the center of that activity. There was probably a saloon in that area. The saloon is now gone. I think there were probably some deaths besides this lady who was killed there. And that's probably what accounts for that. And then there are just some buildings that seem to be sources of paranormal activity that just seem to draw it in and attract that type of stuff. And this building seems to be that type of building.
Included in your book are addresses of the haunted places you write about. I compliment you for that, as it opens the door for all ghost hunters, amateur and professional alike, to explore the sites on their own. Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy Haunted Las Vegas, how, Paul, can they do that?
I wanted people to visit those places. I wanted them to be able to go and see for themselves whether they saw something or whether they felt something, or to do that on their own. You can buy it at any retail outlet. You can buy it obviously at Amazon. You can buy it at Barnes and Noble. You can ask your local bookstore. If they don't have it, they can get a copy because they can get it through a distributor because it's distributed through Globe Pequot Press. It's available just about any place you buy books. You should be able to get it.
Paul W. Papa, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. It has been a great experience yakking with you.
Oh, you too as well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hi everyone, this is Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yakker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. So that you don't miss any upcoming shows, be sure to subscribe to my free YouTube channel. To do that, just press the subscribe button on your screen.